Welcome back to the Career Dad Show, and I'm joined tonight by Ross. Ross, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Dan. How are you?
Good, I'm all right, thank you. I'm all good. So we met through a mutual friend as well, Scott. I went to school with Scott, and uh, I know Scott's not yet a dad, but he's been a huge supporter of Career Dad. And when I started doing the podcasting, he was like, "Mate, there's a few people you need to reach out to," and your name came up. So we had a talk. It feels like a few months ago now, but I'm sure it wasn't. Probably a few weeks ago. But
It's probably the lockdown that's got to us, to be honest, mate. Every day seems to have rolled into one, doesn't it?
it really really does. But you, if I remember rightly, you work in performance management for Rotherham United Football Club. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So my title is performance manager. My role is overseeing the medical and sports science department for the football club.
Wow. And how did you get into that?
Um, a a lot by chance, but a lot through my career starting early as a I wouldn't say a sportsman, but a kind of an attempted sportsman. So I used to play
Okay.
ice hockey, hence
Okay.
the connection with Scott.
Yeah.
Started that reasonably late. Started that when I was kind of 12, 13 years old.
Is that late?
Take yeah, well, I mean, compared to most kids playing ice hockey, they can skate before they can walk.
Wow.
So it was late for me in a sense compared to everyone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started at kind of 12, 13, taking an interest really in the Sheffield Steelers and going watching that with my family. And then thinking, that'd be fun. I'll have a go at that. So at age 14, started playing and kind of developed through the junior system in Sheffield and then progressed into the senior system and never really been that good at it, but was always kind of praised for my fitness and for
Mm.
my work ethic. And that then emulated with me working in a gym. So,
Yeah.
taking an interest in lifting weights and running and keeping fit. So quite late, I then thought, you know what, I'd like to study this. Went into sports science, and I think really the sports science and strength conditioning and all those kind of subjects weren't really that familiar with ice hockey.
Mm.
Ice hockey players didn't have that facility over in the UK, that resource available to them, where a strength conditioning coach or a sports scientist could be available to work within the team.
Yeah.
It's not particularly a very high paid sport anyway. So to get those type of people in to assist is not really there. So
Mm.
it kind of gravitated towards football. There's more money in that sport. There's more resources available, and there was more people like that going into football at the time.
Yeah.
So I helped out at Sheffield Wednesday's academy when I was doing my degree, and then Doncaster Rovers got promoted to the Championship. This was back in 2008, I think it was,
Mm.
2007, 2008 season. And the head physio there at the time was looking for someone to be a fitness coach, and he had a link with Sheffield Wednesday anyway. They put my name forward, and the rest is history, as they say.
Brilliant.
It's me been working in football as well as other sports since then.
Yeah. So what does, because it's so funny because when I see performance manager, for me I've got my digital marketing hat on and I'm like, right, you're looking at
Yeah.
like analytics from a kind of a website and functionality perspective. And it's funny because I was thinking about this before the call, and it's not too a dissimilar job. You're just looking at it from, I guess, a human and biological perspective. But what would an average day look like?
Well, yeah. I mean, we do love a title in sports science and medicine. We love a job title, and my role at Rotherham's kind of really developed from being the fitness coach and kind of looking at being that department lead, which I've done in previous jobs before. Um, a typical day for me is obviously the performance aspect of the players. We need
Mm,
to make sure that we're fitter, faster, stronger than everybody else in the league. And I have a number of staff that can help me coordinate that program and that practice. But then the other side of it as well is the performance aspect of the medical department. So are we making sure that our injuries are as low as they can be? Our availability of players for training and for games are as high as they can be? And then the third aspect of it all is the performance of our staff as people. We have to make sure that we're looking at the performance aspect on the pitch and the performance aspect in the medical room, but are we then looking at performance aspects of the people that are running that program as well? Because equally, that's just as important. If they're not providing the provision to do their jobs effectively and productively, then that's then going to translate to what they're doing in terms of the work with the players. So we need to make sure that we're at our best, or as whatever that looks like, to then enable the players to be at the best at the same time.
Yeah. And
So
so
a
you
day could mean anything.
well, yeah, and I'm just thinking have you been doing this for now kind of 12, 13 years?
Yeah, so 2005,
Oh
I
wow.
was at Sheffield Wednesday's academy, and
Wow.
that was working with the junior setup, coordinating the internship program for nines to under 16s,
Wow.
and then senior football from 2008, with a bit of a stint working over in the States in ice hockey as well,
Brilliant.
which just because it was a boyhood dream of mine with
Yeah.
playing ice hockey, to go and see it firsthand and seeing how the big hitters go and do it over the pond. So yeah, that was a real eye opener for me over there.
Where were you in the States?
That was upstate New York. So I was
Okay.
working for it was the Buffalo Sabres organization,
Yeah.
but my role was head of science and conditioning at the Rochester Americans. So
Yeah.
with their kind of feeder team going into the NHL, that was a big learning curve for me, a
Yeah.
huge learning curve, because you can be institutionalized within your sport.
Yeah.
That people understand football or people understand ice hockey. It's very archaic. It's very
Mm.
traditional. Um, Especially when you're looking at football in an English context and ice
Yes,
hockey in an American context,
for sure.
because they're almost kind of their sports.
Yeah.
You know, football is an English sport, or ice hockey is a Canadian or an American sport.
Yeah.
People can be quite protective over that as well. And
Yeah.
this is how we've always done things. And who's the English boy coming into the States to tell us different? In the same
Well,
way, I suppose that you may have some English coaches that could be quite tribal and quite protective if other people come into their
yeah.
environment.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that
really
it
good
resonates
learning.
so much with me just because I spent a summer teaching basketball over in the States, and
Brilliant.
teaching kids basketball when they've grown, and like basketball, it's not a hugely popular. It's popular in England and the UK, but not to the levels it is over in the US. And teaching 10-year-old kids how to play basketball, and they could just run rings around you. You think this is
Yeah.
nuts, but yeah. And I was thinking of how much transferable was there between the football and the ice hockey?
Oh, well, there was a lot with the science, the physiological
Mm,
science. Energy metabolism, human performance. It is, if you have an understanding of biomechanics, anatomy, physiology, you can transfer that.
yeah,
Even though the energy systems and everything's completely different, you have an understanding, you have an underpinning knowledge to go into that environment. Um, the transferable skills for me were from coordinating a sports science team at Nottingham Forest prior to then going over to the States.
right.
It was how can I try and get the best out of people when I really only just begun to know them.
Mm,
So at Forest, I was there for 3.5, nearly 4 years. So everything became an evolving practice, and everyone
right.
became familiar with one another. Everyone then began to learn about each other. What made them tick, what was important to them, what values, what beliefs. How can we then align as people, as opposed to then just going in there and doing our jobs?
Mm,
Whereas going over to the States, that was extremely difficult. We had English people, we had American people, we had Canadians, we had Australians, we had people from all sorts of walks of life, whether it's football, ice hockey, AFL. So really kind of throwing everyone into the lion's den, and saying
yeah,
kind of, there you go, come on then. You're all, I don't like the word expert, but you are all kind of very well knowledged within your
yeah.
field. What can you do?
Wow.
Let's go and work. And I don't think it's as simple as that. You need to
Yeah.
have a little bit of empathy. towards one another, to understand, what are these person's interests and values, and also difficulties coming into
Yeah.
this environment. Um, and then understanding what makes that person tick. I love personality profiling. I absolutely love it. I think it's there's a lot of kind of laughter and a lot of, oh wow, that's definitely me kind of
Yeah.
quotes that come out after seeing it, and you have that novelty. But I ensure that the staff that we have at Rotherham, there's only a handful of us that are full time. There's a lot of people that come in and bolt on to our practice. But I make sure that we all learn about each other.
Yeah.
And the personality profiling is a great way of creating that interest. I don't like the term buy-in, but creating that interest. So I can get to learn so much about my staff in the way that they can get to learn about me in terms of communication styles, strengths, weaknesses, when to talk to me, when not to talk to me,
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
sorts of different difficulties that may be presented along the way. And the interesting side for me on the personality profile is how quickly it brings people together,
Yeah.
because it's this kind of, yep, that's definitely you. I know not to talk to you the first thing in the morning because you might not be this morning lark. You might be a bit of a
Yeah.
night owl. So coming in the morning, it might just be a case of I'll put a cup of tea or a cup of coffee on your desk and
Yeah.
I'll leave you for an hour. And then straight away, by doing something like that, the person who you took the cup of tea or cup of coffee to might go, well, that's a kind gesture. He's an all right lad,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you get this bond and you get this relationship. And I think there's little things like that
Yeah.
the personality profiling can initiate. But ultimately, and what it does for me is it allows us to understand that we're people and we're not occupations.
Yes.
So straight away, I know that Adam brought me a cup of tea in the morning, not the sports scientist brought me a
Yeah.
cup of tea in the morning. And
Yeah.
it allows us to then say, right, well, he's a person, and then we all do our jobs separately.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what the question was that you asked me, Dan. I've gone on a complete rant there, if I'm honest. But
I like it, and to be
I've
honest, I
just
can't even.
snowballed in my head.
No, I can't remember what the question was, but it must have been good because I've got three more questions off the back of what you've just said.
Oh,
And I think firstly, before my first question, the personality profiles is so I find so invaluable, and I think it's really interesting to build those cohesive teams, because I remember when I first did one, and it's sort of, and you saw the paper and I thought, I don't want my boss to read this, because it was just, it was all really good at building enthusiasm and launching stuff and getting people to get excited, but don't expect him to finish anything because he'll be on to the next thing, right? And I thought, oh geez. But then it was realizing that there were other people in the team who would shudder at the thought of doing that yeehaw, let's all get going. They just wanted to be a part of that, but then actually take something and deliver it. And I just thought, oh, actually I just need to partner up with you and together we can smash this.
yeah,
And I think that was so important. And the reason that I said that is because as you were talking about, understanding people and understanding values and what makes them tick, before you started saying that, I was thinking, well, hang on, surely you're just looking at data. Surely this is a very scientific, body needs this, feed it and with this, and it will create this outcome. And then you're talking about the more empathetic, getting to know people. So that's just really blown away my beliefs of actually what it is that you're doing. And so I'm just thinking, what is the balance between that hard science and those really softer, more people empathetic skills?
yeah. It's a great question. I am a massive geek. I will hold my hands up and I will go, yes, data, please, every single minute of the day.
Yeah.
We are very, very data reliant. We look at all sorts of measurements, from profiling key performance indicators on physical match demands. What should our midfielders be doing in these positions within this system to then become effective? Are we then transferring skills within the gym in terms of our strength profiling that we'll then do on force plate analysis? Is that then going to transfer onto the pitch in terms of developing speed and explosive sprinting? There's all sorts of that. But I think to go from the test to then the solution or the outcome, not the outcome, the achievement, there's a process that we then need to go through in between. And it can become within sports science and medical realms really objective and really robotic.
Mm.
But then, if we're working with footballers in this example, who are different creatures compared to what our minds would be in terms of
Mm.
pretty much academics, um, but to get the message across to them isn't going to be in the scientific way that we can understand it. It has to
Mm.
be in layman's terms, or it has to, it may not even mean that much to them. It may not be important to them. And if it's not important to them, then they're not going to have an interest in what we're doing. So
Mm.
I think the biggest thing that they crave, athletes crave, is the belonging, is the security, is the arm round them to kind of bring them through when they're at Stoke on a Tuesday night. That old saying comes out, or the winter months in the business end of the season, where if they're on a bus on a 5-hour journey back from Bournemouth,
Yeah.
all they're going to do is look on the phones to see what the fans are thinking of the performance going through Twitter or
Really?
Instagram or whatever else. So then if I then present them with objective data to say, you didn't run enough today, or you're not strong enough in the gym, or even if you go the other way and say, you ran brilliant tonight and you covered a lot of distance, or you're getting stronger in the gym, all they will look for is, well, what's people's opinions of me,
Mm.
or what is the opinion of the manager on me, or how do I feel about my performance myself. So this is when we start and look at how empathy, especially, can be a really powerful tool within sporting cultures. And I haven't any experience in business, but I suppose the same. If a person, a footballer in this case, is craving for that need to feel wanted, to feel as if he's performed, there's so much around performance anxiety within professional sport these
Yeah.
days. The worry to go and compete, and I think for me that if you can remove the pleasure of competing,
Mm.
um, and have too much pressure in competing, then what are we trying to achieve here? We're trying to get a person, a footballer, to become better at what they do.
Mm.
If I go to Meadowhall and I don't want to go into a shop, I'm probably going to go into that shop with my missus dragging me in there, thinking, I don't want to be in here, and
Yeah.
I'm going to have a face, and I'm going to have a sulk on, and I'm going to be stamping my feet or waiting at the door. It's exactly the same with a footballer. If my missus wants to take me into a shop that I don't want to go in, I'll behave that way. If I want to go into a shop that I want to buy something from, I'll be brilliant. I'll stay in there
Yeah.
for a little bit longer. I'll take a look around. I'll be interested in other things. For the footballer, it's exactly the same. Bring him into an environment that he wants to be interested in, that he
Mm.
feels safe in, that he feels happy in. And I think these kind of codes of practice that we operate at Rotherham is completely aligned within every single member of our staff. The manager drives it as well. His belief on an emotional, intelligent culture is extremely powerful, and this is
Mm.
why we've become quite successful within the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I know we managed to not stop in the championship and we got relegated out of the championship, but I don't know many managers or many teams that can get promoted in successive years,
Yeah.
um, up, down, up again. It's a really, really difficult league to get promoted out, as you can look at League One this year. But I think his ability to get all of us to buy into, not buy into, to align to that, I
Mm.
think is really, really beneficial for not just us as a staff, because we feel as if we're contributing to something bigger than ourselves, but also the players massively, because they want to go out and perform on the pitch. And
Yeah.
I think it's almost kind of if you ask an old sportsman, why did you play for that manager? You'd run through brick walls for him, but you
Mm.
couldn't put your finger on why. You just enjoyed it. You just loved
Yeah.
doing it. You just liked him.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of there's a lot of power to that by creating that type of a culture.
Yeah. That's really shocked me about when you were talking about, the tour bus checking, social media, what people are saying about them on the way. I don't know, I just envisaged that these guys are in the top point whatever percent of athletes on a
Yeah,
global scale, right? And people have good days, people have bad days, but I'd hate to imagine, as a fan, it would be easy to sit back and go, so and so should have done this, armchair warrior kind of thing, and just to know the impact that that is potentially having on that individual.
Yeah,
Mm.
I've seen it firsthand with obviously players that are, sometimes just broken to tears for no
Yeah,
reason.
yeah.
For no reason. They could have won the game. They could have had a great performance, but because of the level of anxiety that sometimes that it can carry into games, and
Mm.
you look at other occupations, and other occupations are you can turn up to work and you can sometimes in some jobs just coast through the day.
Yeah,
There's nothing there. There's nobody watching over your shoulder.
yeah.
Nobody saying if you've done it right, done it wrong, done a good job, done a bad job. I know that that's not the same for every job, but imagine going into a place of work 6, 7 days a week, where let's say you're playing 2 games that week. For the other 4 days, you have your peers and you have the manager and the coaching staff critically analysing every single movement you make on the training
Mm.
pitch, wanting all the data that they can get from the sports science, the medical team, and the analysts, information of you, and then putting you, if you're lucky enough, by the way, if you're lucky to play a game of football for the football club, because is that you, as a footballer, you get paid to train, and then you
Yeah.
get the privilege of, if you're good enough, worthwhile to play. Imagine how all day you're driving. It's a strong thing that you have to try and think against. So I think the more you can be around people like that to nurture them and give them that empathetic comfort, the more you can then get out of them, because it's an extremely demanding environment to be within if you're constantly being put under the microscope every day.
Yeah, and you were talking there about, which again I was just thinking about my own job, thinking, geez, if I had someone, oh, that email you could have worded it in this way, or that call you could have said this. Why didn't you challenge in this way? I'd want to slap someone. Like, so it must take a real person to be kind of open. Well, I guess this is kind of potentially where you say like people could just break down, because it's not even just the managers and that support team and the peers on the pitch in the training grounds. It's then the media, the fans, the social media, 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you take, let's say, for an example, a midfielder. If a midfielder makes, I don't know, let's say for argument's sake, threes, 100 passes a game,
Hmm.
every single one of those passes is going to be analysed.
Yeah.
And if you make one of those passes to the opposition, or give up possession, and they go ahead and score, that pass has got a critical consequence.
Hmm.
If you make 100 emails or 100 phone calls a day,
Yeah.
and you're being analysed on every single phone call,
Yeah.
I'm not too sure that an email or a phone call, it possibly can have that same critical consequence.
Yeah.
But imagine having negative or positive feedback on every single call or
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
single
Yeah.
email that you send.
Well,
At
this is the
some
thing.
point, you're going to be, oof, don't like
For
that.
because I'm just thinking, I've probably sent some shirty emails and been pretty blunt with people, and I try not to be, but sometimes it can happen. But it's I also I'm always aware that it's kind of happening, and the consequences at worst case is that I've called someone up and said, look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, or whatever it was. But with your analogy there, or your example, sorry, if a midfielder passes the ball, their intention is not to give it to the opposition. So,
Exactly.
they're trying to do a positive thing that's just gone a bit wrong. I've messed up loads of times, but if I've done something that my intentions were good and they came up foul, that's not really a problem as long as I learn from it. I don't check my LinkedIn and people are like, "Oh, Dad, you should." So that must, yeah, I'm really starting to get my eyes open to the amount of pressure that these guys are under.
It's it is, and this is why what I try and do is, if I was to provide another example, let's say for example you're a postman,
Hmm.
and when you go to work to deliver the 100 letters, imagine having someone there to help you deliver the 100 letters.
Yeah.
Let's go the opposite to it now. Rather than be analysed and critiqued on every single letter that you deliver, imagine if you've got someone there to help you deliver every single letter.
Hmm.
That's the difference, and that's what we try and do as a staff at the club. We understand that we're not going to make every single pass for every single player or every single shot for every single player. But imagine coming to work and being like, "Can I help you today?"
Hmm.
Imagine that, how powerful that can be.
Yeah.
So you've got somebody there to assist you in everything that you possibly do, whether
Mm.
it's in the gym, whether it's on the pitch, or whether it's otherwise. And if as long as we can give that supportive message to in training, don't worry, it's okay. We'll work you through it. We'll get you better. We understand we may be asking you to play this way. There are mistakes going to be made. Don't worry about it. We're there to help you. Put an arm around them. I bring
Mm.
what I do is I have a certain number of players that we have cups of coffee and cakes. It's probably not the best in terms of an athlete's diet, um, but that's the power of it. We
Yeah.
kind of we drop ourselves out of that professional elite category. And, we're
Mm.
just two blokes having like what we are now, a cup of
Yeah.
tea and a chat,
Yeah.
and we do that with the lads. I have certain places that we go that kind of like our places.
Mm.
So there might be a certain coffee shop that we go to that I wouldn't go to I wouldn't go with any other player to that particular
Yeah.
coffee shop. That's ours.
Yeah.
In the same way that we have a certain time or a certain part of the week that I bring a player in for a chat, and we might not even talk about football at all. It could just be a case of we're having a chat about how things are at home, how
Mm.
you're dealing with travel. It may not even be about anything at all
Yeah.
that could be bothering them. It might just be let's talk about what TV programs we're watching at the minute.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think those are the situations where players can feel as if they can offload, or they
Mm.
can talk to you about things, or they can just feel a person again rather than being an under the microscope athlete. And I
Yeah.
think that's really, really important. And I think that's where I can do that to my staff in terms of the personality profiling before I get to know them. But I think the players especially is something that we can just go, do you know what? You're a person before you're a professional player, a
Mm.
professional footballer. So let's behave like a person just for a little
Yeah.
bit of time, make you feel normal again.
Yeah, no, I love that. It sounds like you'd be an amazing person to work alongside or work with. So it seems like
Oh,
a very
I,
lucky
I,
team.
I have my moments.
But I bet
Surely
it
be a
comes from
few
a good
people to say
place.
otherwise.
Yeah. And this is actually quite a nice segue because you mentioned, sometimes you'll have a chat about the travel and you're also a dad, which is why one of the other reasons that I wanted to speak to
Yeah.
you. And how many kids do you have?
I've got two. I've got two
Okay.
kids, Eddie and Amelia, 5 and 7, soon to be 15 and 17 with how they're
Really?
behaving at the minute.
Genuine, honestly. I do, so have you because so my son's just turned 6 and I swear since going into lockdown, I mean he's always been a bit not old, but you know what I mean, like he's always acted just a little bit older and he's just in the way that he talks and things, but he's just become a little independent soul during lockdown, and I don't know whether it's just him or whether like so just yeah have they changed much during lockdown?
Do you know what? Yeah, massively.
Yeah.
The time that I managed to have with them throughout lockdown, because we were operating all of our almost off-season programming from home, and we did it all
Yeah.
through Zoom and the Strava groups and everything else like that. But yeah, the development that I've seen from them since March through to now over 5 months has been incredible.
Really?
Physically, we'd go out and we'd run quite a bit, and we'd go out on bikes and made sure we did everything quite outdoorsy if we could. We had
Mm.
quite a bit of decent weather at the beginning of lockdown, maybe not so much now.
Yeah.
But where we are in Sheffield is reasonably rural, so we have got parks and countryside available to us. So
Mm.
we just go out and explore, and I think that's a different element of learning for them altogether, isn't it? Rather than
Yeah.
within the confines of the school, just learning how to talk to dad, or for
Yeah.
me, how to talk to Eddie and Amelia, and
Mm.
that's presented its difficulties,
Yeah.
because it is challenging when you don't get 1-2 hours a day with them sometimes, and then you find yourself having 24 hours a day with them.
Yeah.
Um, that was a real challenge, and maybe we should have done some personality profiling with the kids to help me help me learn how to talk to them.
So honestly, so I mentioned before we started recording, we had a career dad kind of virtual meetup this morning, and one of the guys who joined was talking about the 5 love languages, which I don't know if you've come across.
Oh no,
But
that
it's
interests me.
no, it is quite interesting. I'll send you a link afterwards. So it's basically there are 5 different ways that you can say you can let others know how you like to give love and how you like to receive love. So it could be affirmation, so being told that you're loved or telling others that you're loved, or it could be through gifts, and not like, a new Xbox or whatever, but literally, I've drawn you this picture, or it could be through tasks, as in like the ironing needs doing, so I'm going to do the ironing, and that's how I'm showing that I love you. And the guy was who was talking about this was saying, until you understand where you sit within there and where your partner, but also your kids sit within there, it's really difficult to, you could find yourself frustrated, because if you're someone that likes to show love through tasks, and his example was, I'd do all the ironing and tidy up, cleaning for my wife, and to be like, I love you, and for her, she wouldn't see that as love affirmation. Hers was more gift. So he'd go, I've done all this stuff for you, and she'd go, and that's a job. And so when they kind of realized how they both liked to give and receive, and also with the kids, he said it was just world changing, and I just find that quite fascinating.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's I think today has been the first day since lockdown I've actually been in the shop. And
Really?
that's quite strange. So it's my daughter's birthday next week.
Hmm.
Not next week. No, what date is it today? We're still in August, aren't we? See,
Yeah.
all the days have just gone into one. It's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks. So we went into Smith's today,
Nice.
and that was a moment in itself, because
Hmm.
the kids haven't really been in a toy shop either. So that was an absolute whirlwind.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, understanding the needs of a child, and understanding the needs of your wife, and understanding the needs
Hmm.
of yourself, and
Hmm.
that looks different to everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
terms of how you give and receive love, and how you give and receive praise,
Yeah.
or just simply how you communicate. I mean, that's an interesting, wasn't it? Can you imagine going into the kitchen going, "Hi, love, I've done all your washing up, I've done all your washing for you, and I've done all your
Yeah.
ironing for you," and she'll go, "Why did you think that was my job to do?
Yeah.
You
I know,
sexist
right?
so and so,"
Yeah.
and you go, "Oh, no, no, I
Yeah.
didn't mean it like that," and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you do yourself a massive hole, haven't
Yeah,
you?
exactly, exactly. I think, yeah, and it's funny because with my, I think from doing, because there's a little quiz you can do, and I think that I'm more of like a touchy feely person, so I'd like, go to my son and be like, oh, come and give me a hug. He doesn't seem to be that. He seems to be more of there's ones around quality time, just spending time together, and one around gifting. So if I kind of do him a little drawing and like, I made this for you, he'll be like over the moon. If I'm like, come here, he'll be like, no, 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 no. And I used to get a bit upset, being like, oh, why, does he not? And it's like, well, actually, that's just not his thing. That's okay, and to not push that onto. So yeah, it's a whole minefield, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. It's very, very interesting when we talk about quality time with the kids, or quality time with the family,
Yeah.
because if you look at quality time, people always want to do something. So if I
Yes.
say, "Oh, the gaffer's giving me a couple of days off, or the team a couple of days off," and everybody's there booking trips to Alton Towers, or booking a couple of days in the lakes, or doing something,
Yeah.
um, but how is that seen as quality time? I
Mm.
think that the quality time for me is just the interaction with your children,
Yeah.
or with your wife, and sometimes that could be just as simple as, and I love it, just packing a bag full of sandwiches and drinks and whatever, and we'll just go for a big walk.
Yeah.
We'll find things to do, like throwing sticks into a river, or hide and seek in the woods, and having that interaction. Whereas if I went to the cinema with the kids on a quality day,
Mm.
I'm not going to see them for 2 hours, because we're
Yeah. Yeah.
sat
Yeah.
watching a screen.
Yeah.
If I then take them to a theme park or something, it's great, but it's daddy, daddy, daddy. Can I do this? Can I do
Yeah.
that? Can
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do that? Not let's have a chat about us,
Yeah.
and spending quality time with us.
Yeah.
But that's my kind of love affirmation.
Yeah.
That's, I like just being around people. It doesn't matter where I am or
Yeah.
what I'm doing, as long as there's not a great deal of other distractions that'll take me away, or take my kids away from me.
Yeah.
But it's very, very difficult when you've got a 5 and 7 year old that may seem kind of grumpy dad going for a walk, or having
Yeah.
fun on rides and watching things and eating sweets and everything else. So it's really, really difficult to get that
It
balance, isn't it?
it is, I've started to try and think instead of quality time, meaningful time, because
I like,
meaningful time could be, well, we're just gonna just build some Lego for a bit, or it
yeah,
doesn't have to be some big grand gesture. It just has to be, I try to get more get into the world that my kids are in, as opposed to try and bring them into my world, which is something I really struggle with at times. Yeah.
that's. I really struggle with that though, Dan. If I'm
Mm.
honest, having that meaningful time because the phone's always there,
Yeah.
or the Apple Watch is always on, and uh, I I can't be that guy that puts the phone in the bottom drawer
Yeah.
for an hour in an evening in case the manager rings and goes, we've got a quick medical that needs to be done tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Kind of medical team assemble and and get the medical done in the morning. So
Yeah.
that phone has to be there for me. It's really, really difficult to be present and,
Yeah.
and to be kind of in that moment without having these other distractions. It was really kind of innocent of my kids during lockdown to be when we were doing the fitness classes on the Zoom calls on the TV, or we'd do spin bike sessions via Zoom, or
Mm.
we'd do other kind of interactive kind of quiz nights and things to keep people, keep the footballers and keep the staff all kind of connected via Zoom. And everything was just, oh, Daddy, are you on your phone to your mates again, or
Yeah.
and it wasn't really seen as work,
Yeah.
and that just goes to show how innocent they believe the use of my phone or my MacBook or whatever it would be is to them.
Mm.
But as a distraction, and I say distraction, it distracts me away from my kids. It's really, really hard for me to have that understanding of what's more important.
Yeah.
And that for me gets in my head a little bit, where I think it's how hard is it to accept that sometimes work's more important than your family. That
Yeah, but I think that sometimes it is, and that's not a popular. There'll be people screaming, "Dan, you're
yeah,
wrong, Dan, you're wrong." But I think, I it's really easy, and I even felt like that. I said to my wife last night. I said I feel like sometimes I've spent less time with my son during lockdown than when I was commuting to London, because which is nuts. And part of that is we do have a 1 year old now as well, and she basically spends her time between me and my wife, and so that's part of the reason I think my son has a bit more of that independence, because what are his options? Like, he's got
yeah,
to,
yeah,
and I feel quite bad about, and the work that I do. I do a lot of digital work within a bank, and so obviously when a lot of the kind of old, when the banks were closed and the call centers were closed, everyone wanted digital. So me and the team are working around the clock. I'm not seeing family, and it really got to me. But when I try, and it's easy to say than do, but sometimes to think, did I did I make the best choice that I could with the information I had at that moment in time? Because it's really easy to go, oh well, I've not spent as much time with the family today. But actually, let's not look at that in hindsight. Let's go back to that moment and go, could I have done that differently with the information I had then as opposed to what I know now? And if it's no, I I can't really beat myself up about that.
hindsight's a wonderful thing. That the old
Mm,
saying comes out there, doesn't it? Where you think, I wish I would have spent more time with my son, daughter,
yeah,
wife at that point. But then looking back, if you go retrospectively and you go, well, okay, put myself in those shoes again.
yeah,
How is that possible?
yeah,
That that kind of concept of work can be more important than your family. That was a really difficult pill for me to swallow
mm,
when I had my first child.
yeah,
I was working a lot, I was commuting a lot, and all I wanted to be was at home to watch my daughter grow up. And for every
yeah,
day that I wasn't there, I felt as if I was missing out
yeah,
massively. And huge amounts of guilt on me. In my head, obviously, family was more important than work.
mm,
But then as a result, my work life kind of really suffered because I was wanting to be at home. I was constantly at work, feeling terrible about not being at home. So
yeah,
work kind of went bump down, but then I wasn't seeing my family. So
yeah,
then that quality time went down. And then I thought, well, what am I achieving here?
Yeah.
I'm suffering here mentally, but also operationally. So what do I have to change? And I know we spoke about this a few weeks ago when we last spoke about. I started just saying to myself, right, whatever I'm doing with the information that I have available to me, if I see this as being the most important thing at that time, then that's what I'm going to tell myself it is, and nothing else kind of really matters within that moment. So if I'm at work, then nothing else in the world matters to me apart from my work at that time, and I'm going to fully commit and fully immerse myself in doing the best that I possibly can for that block. After work's finished and I go home, and it's really, really difficult to with the distractions that are there. But whilst you're around playing Nintendo Switch with my lad, or if I'm building Lego with my daughter, that's the most important thing in the world at that time for me.
Yeah.
And I think it was a really, really challenging, but a really, really easy way for me once I learned how to do it, to convince myself that there's no need to be feeling that guilt.
Yeah.
That guilt that comes with I'm not committing to my job or I'm not committing to my family. You can get that balance as long as you then, commit to certain amounts of time. But I thought that was the best way for me to deal with it, just to convince myself it's the most important thing in the world at that time. Don't worry, you'll get opportunities to then do the other side or do the other bits, and then you can commit and immerse yourself in that section. I've not got it right. I don't think I ever will get it right, but it definitely helps me to get rid of that little bit of guilt that I used to feel.
Yeah, I love that, and that is absolutely the title of this podcast when it goes live. It's the most important thing at that time, and I think that's it. And you talk about you're not there. I don't where's there. I think it's a journey as opposed to a destination, and I think I even when, as you say, we had that conversation a few weeks ago, I've kept thinking about what you've said, and I'm sure that just in case someone didn't quite catch it. The most important thing at that time. I just think it's brilliant.
That's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to when I said about taking a couple of the footballers to one side, those that may need that little bit of a comforting chat. Okay, then the phone's in my pocket or it's even left inside. I'm only going to be talking to them for 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever it would be. No distractions if you can help it. You can section off half an hour, can't you? Half an hour is quite easily doable to section off.
Yeah.
You can pick up on other bits afterwards, no problem. But then just fully commit to that, and just tell yourself, okay, this conversation that I'm having, in the same way that we're having the conversation now, it's the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
And give it your all. Fully immerse yourself in this moment, and then once it's finished, okay, what's next?
Yeah,
that's what I'm going to commit to. That's what I'm going to commit to.
Yeah,
and it's really, really helped me.
And
really
because if it's not the most important thing at that time, then do what is. Right?
Yeah, then why are you doing it? Yeah, exactly.
why are you doing it? And I think the whole guilt thing you talked about is so. I ended up going. I had 9 months of therapy to deal with guilt, anxiety, and I think what really, really helped, because when I said work can sometimes be more important, I would feel terrible to even think that. But when I started realizing that, because growing up, work was this thing that you had to do, and you had to suck it up, and you had to earn money, and you had to provide, and that was what you were doing. And then when I started work and realized that I liked it, and thought, this is weird, this isn't supposed to happen. And so then when you have that message in your head of going, well, I'm working hard to earn all of this money to provide for you, family, and then family could say, but you're away, we don't see you, and you think, in your head, you think, well, hang on a minute, I'm doing this for you, and you don't realize. And then when I really started to think about it and thought, well, I am doing it for us as a family, but actually I'm doing it for me, and selfishly I'm doing it because I enjoy it, and that's my satisfaction. And so then that kind of pivots the conversation a bit, and that really helped me to not feel as guilty, and to not project this big thing onto someone else, but to actually take ownership and go, actually, if I'm in London and my boss says, "Do you want to grab a beer after work?" I can't text my wife and go, "I'm going to be home a bit late because I'm going for a beer, but don't worry, I'm doing it for you." Like, do you know what I mean? So I think that really helped, and as I think your message was around, doing the most important thing at that moment.
Yeah, it's exactly the same when you talk about going for a beer with your boss after work. You know that I think they are probably the most crucial parts of
Yeah.
people's job, the interaction side of things and building relationships and understanding what makes each other tick. But
Mm.
then the other side of it is that when people are looking at, oh, your job, you get to go for a beer and that's part of your job.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, in my opinion, I've got one of the best jobs in the world.
Yeah.
I'm going out running with players at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and then I've
Yeah.
got training again at 10:30, and then, when we travel, we stop at some nice hotels because it's a performance environment. We're not going for a spa weekend, but
Yeah.
I don't want to take players to a hotel where they're going to wake up in the morning with a bad back because the mattresses are terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are going to have to stop at some nice places.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people that look at you go, I wouldn't mind a bit of that.
Yeah.
That's all right. What you get to do, that's a great job.
Yeah.
But I don't think they don't look past that.
Yeah.
They don't look past how important the things that you do are. They just see it at face value
Yeah.
for the same reason what you just said there. I'm going to go for a beer with my boss. Brilliant. I'd love to go for a beer, but I
Yeah.
don't. I've got to stay at home and look after the kids.
Yeah.
But then it's, well, please, if you can have an understanding of how that then looks afterwards, it's so easy, isn't it, to be this defensive,
Yeah.
reactional, argumentative person when you clash because people want what you have, and then you
Mm.
think, I'm doing this to provide for you, and yeah, it becomes really difficult. But I think that's when conversations become so important, and we can
Absolutely.
have this conversation of, well, yeah, and this is what I have to do, but I'm not going to do it in an aggressive way, and I'm not going to kind of
Mm.
be defensive about it. But unfortunately, yeah, I'm having to spend time away, and if the hardest part for me was to convince myself that yes, work is more important at times.
Mm.
The hardest part again after that is making your loved ones realize that, and that's the big sell.
Yeah.
That is the big sell. And I don't know if that'll ever happen,
No.
but in a world where we are demanded from as people within our occupations, it can be a very very tough time mentally, for us to kind of have this work life balance that they always call.
Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of the term work life balance, and it's hard because everyone know when people say work life balance, people know what is meant by it. But
Mhm.
I just think life is this all encompassing thing of which work is a part of. So how can you balance work against the whole, because it's just a part of the whole? And so I think you could have work family balance, or but yeah, I just I've heard some other concepts. I'm sure there's someone making a mint off of all this naming convention somewhere, but I do quite like work life integration,
Yeah,
or but I just think it is just about, it really resonated what you said about not being able to put the phone in the bottom drawer, because when people say to me, "Oh, you need to switch off," I might do some emails after we've finished. That's my choice to do so, but it's also because I went downstairs to play Fortnite at 3 in the afternoon. So
yeah,
for me, it's about, or I'm trying to. I've signed up to this virtual challenge where I've got to. I think I've got to run 280 kilometers by the end of the year, and it works out about 15k a week or something. So it's
okay,
more. I'll at least know that I'll go out for 3 short runs a week, and that's good. So I'll know that tomorrow I'll probably go out for a run during quote work time, but
yeah,
then I will do work in quote non-work time. And when I've
yeah,
tried to have that rigidness, that's actually made my anxiety worse, because part of work for me is that social side, and I want to be on WhatsApp. Oh, what are you guys up to, or whatever it is. And so I
yeah, yeah.
I I know for me, I work well when it's blended, but I think it's just knowing yourself and how you best work.
Yeah, I looked into a lot. by a researcher, Richard Boyatzis,
Right.
and this is one of the my good friends who I kind of bounce a lot of ideas off. He travels the world. He's an unbelievable person. You have a conversation with him for half an hour, and your mind is blown. He's one of those that you don't want to tap into regularly because you don't want to ruin it. Yeah. But every now and then you give him a call and you think, wow, it's like winning the lottery. You can walk away, it's amazing. And the conversation we last had was, and what you said there about the tucking the phone away in the bottom drawer and bringing it out back later on, and not being able to switch off. As someone working in professional sport, I don't think you ever can.
Mm.
It is this cloud in their head where even when people talk to you, you're thinking about what's happening for training
Yeah.
tomorrow, or you're thinking about what team to select, or you're thinking about this injury that you need to get rehab. And it's really, really difficult to try and be that present person. But then the other side of it is the draining element, this negative energy that gets drained. So what I looked at with Richard Baratzis was what I do a lot with my staff that I've got, where we plot down what's important to them in their life, so what
Mm.
commitments they have, their physical health, and also their kind of energy levels.
Right.
So what we do with those are what are ideal and what are actual.
Right.
So if I then look at it from a time perspective, how much time are you spending with your loved ones or other commitments or things that you enjoy doing? How much time are you then spending with physical health, activity levels, exercise? And the other one is obviously how much time are you then spending at work? But
Mm.
the bottom one's so important because the, the energy levels they're not tangible, they're not real.
Mm.
So what I mean by that is I can have time talking to you, and I can have time with my family, and I can have time, and I can then make allowances for that. When I then come to the second one, physical activity, like what you said, you can drop for a 5K run in the afternoon at this time and then
Mm.
pick time back up at work later on. That's absolutely fine. But the energy levels are really, really difficult because as soon as you've finished work per se and clocked out, it doesn't mean you clocked out in your head.
Exactly.
You don't turn off. You
Yeah.
can't switch off. And it's really difficult knowing that you may have an inbox of emails, or you've got this to occupy your time with tomorrow,
Mm.
or you've got an expected call coming through from one of the directors at whatever time it is, and
Mm.
you've got to mentally prepare for this call coming through, but you don't know when the call might be. How do you switch off from that? You
Yeah.
can't switch off. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be prevalent
Yeah.
within the job that we do. And the really, really difficult part of that, what I do with my staff is I can't then sit them down and go, don't worry, it's 7 o'clock, turn your phone off, turn your emails off, and switch your mind off. It
Mm.
doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah, no, I know, and it's so funny because the work that I do with some companies is around that whole 9 to 5 mindset. In that, that working time came about in the turn of the 19th century as a way to stop child labor, and then it was revolutionary. Now, not so much because we don't work in jobs that require. We don't really do those physical jobs anymore. We do more of those mental jobs, those what quote intellectual jobs. And it's not even like the late 90s where you'd shut down a desktop and leave it. Our work's on these. They're on our
Yeah.
phones. So it's really hard to. I don't understand why we're operating in a constraint from 200 years ago when the world has moved on so much. But anyway, that's a whole separate podcast.
It is, yeah,
So
it is.
yeah,
I think it's just something that's it's ever evolving. It's ever,
exactly.
I think my point of kind of looking at that Richard Boyatzis stuff, the intentional change theories and learning theories and whatever else it would be, the biggest thing comes back to that the people work with people. And I
Yes.
think that's what we always have to come back to. So yes, I can help you with your physical activity if you feel that's what you need more of.
Mm.
The man creates the calendar in this instance where I can then go, yep, you can take a break there, or don't come in on this day, or if this is important to you, then we can find ways around it to then help
Yeah.
with your physical activity. The same with your family. If you're having massive family commitments, that things that need to be are needing to be worked on, or that you need to create more time for, then yeah, we can make allowances there. We can really help you out.
Mm.
But the one thing we can't do is we can't then say shut off.
Yeah.
We can't do that. But I think this is when it comes down to, let's have a cup of tea, let's have a chat. We can't
Yeah.
shut off, but maybe we can maybe have these conversations that give us a bit of closure, and
Yeah.
they can give us the comfort and security in knowing that my boss or my colleague understands me. They
Mm.
have an understanding of what I'm going through, and that really, really helps me. And
Yeah.
then we go back to that example that we used before about the postman. If you go and help the postman hand out the 100 letters, that's exactly what you're doing there.
Yeah.
You're understanding the difficulties or the constraints or the life of the person, and having a cup of tea and a piece of cake with them. I enjoy a piece of cake, so maybe that's a little bit of my downfall. But I can give them the opportunity to say, look, let's see how I can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fantastic. And the last question that I wanted to ask you was just around parental advice. And there's quite a few people who listen to this podcast who aren't yet parents. I don't know if they're putting in groundwork or whatever they're doing. But what would you say to someone who isn't yet a parent, or is expecting, or what is either the best piece of advice you've had, or that you'd like to give?
Oh wow, what a great question. Um, you can tell that I was quite comfortable in answering the other questions. This one's put me on the back foot a little bit. Parental advice. Wow, I don't feel
Yeah,
I'm at liberty to give any parental advice if I'm honest.
I quite like
What?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't feel as if I've got the skills or any kind of really strong advice to give, other than whatever you experience, it's normal.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the biggest messages that really helped me, not knowing that people went through the same hardships or the
Mm.
same kind of bad times as me, or but I the one that I always use is when I did have the opportunity to take the children to a baby group, or when my wife took the children to a toddler group. It wasn't for the fact that they could go there and have the babies all play together, because at
Yeah.
6 months, 7 months, they don't know what they're doing. They're
Yeah.
just seeing colours and shapes and sounds. Um, but what it allowed the parents to do was have a cup of coffee and just go, do you know what? I'm having these problems. And
Mm.
the other parents going, yeah, me too. And they go, oh, it's hard, isn't it? Yeah, it is. But how good do you feel after you've had that
Yeah.
conversation? And I think that the biggest parental advice I'd give to people is make sure that you've got other people around you who are
Mm.
experiencing similar things, if that's helpful. Make
Yeah.
new friends, new relationships with people at these groups, or even if it is picking up the phone if you're unable to do so in lockdown, or I know things are starting to ease a little bit now,
Mm.
and just keep that social interaction, because it can become a really lonely, tiring, kind
Yeah.
of dark time.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier now for me when my kids are older, because you can have
Mm.
so much more social interaction with them. But when my kids were really young and when they were babies, and you are emotionally drained and physically drained and mentally drained, having that interaction with other people definitely helped me, because it just reaffirmed to me what I was going through was completely normal, and
Yeah.
I wasn't being hard done by.
Yeah.
It was just the hardship that you have to endure, and maybe you could take a little bit of enjoyment in the fact that you've got people who are sharing similar experiences that you can almost kind of laugh about, really, at the end
Yeah.
of the day. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing I'd probably say with it. But I really don't feel at liberty to give any parental
No,
advice.
I love that. I love that because I think, the core message that I'm hearing is whatever you're experiencing, it's okay. And actually, if you can find someone else to share that experience with, and I'd say particularly dads, because there's a lot of groups that are geared towards mums and set up for mums, absolutely rightly so, but dads feel and want to be as involved as much as mums. So I think it's
I
great
think it's
advice.
just important for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's,
for sure.
male, female, whatever
Yeah.
situation you're in, it's the same, not the same for everyone, but everybody has some feelings or change of feelings within the
Yeah.
circumstances, and everybody needs support, everybody needs help. And,
Yes.
if you can offer support and offer help to others, or even if you feel that you need to ask for it, then there's no shame in that whatsoever. That's completely and utterly normal.
Yeah.
That's what humans are wired up for. Humans are wired up for empathy. So, make sure that you're there to help someone, and make sure you ask for help if you need it as well.
I love it. Well, for someone that didn't have any advice, that was great
Oh,
advice.
yeah, I went a bit
Good
stronger
job.
towards the end. I didn't on
No,
my
it's good.
advice.
It's all
Absolutely.
right. We can edit that. That's fine. No, that's
Chop
great,
that
Ross.
bit
It's
out.
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great
That's
rest
fine.
of your evening.
No,
Cheers.
thanks ever so much for the chat. I've loved that. Thank you.
Great.